wametufanyia. Mambo ya institutes, mambo ya masomo, mambo ya kina mama maternity, pesa ya wazee, pesa ya mayatima, yote tumepata kupitia serikali ya Jubilee. Na tukiwapatia miaka ingine 5, nina hakika Samburu itang'ara kama Kenya ingine. Na 2022 sisi kama Samburu tutasimama na Deputy President wetu akitafuta urais ya Jamhuri ya Kenya. So mimi nataka kuungana na nyinyi kumkaribisha Deputy President hapa nyumbani, na hasa kwa sababu ya maendeleo. Ameanzia maneno ya barabara, na hivi karibuni alikuwa maneno ya stima hapa Bomet, juzi alikuwa kule Soti, na mimi nataka kushukuru Deputy President kwa sababu hiyo maneno yote yanafanyika kwa sababu yeye ni Deputy President wetu.
Sisi tumeketi na vile tumesema safari ya kesho ipangwe leo. 2022 nataka kuhakikishia watu wote mlima, na dada yangu Chebet amewaelezea, kura yetu tutapigia William Samoei Ruto.
With me in studio is Washington Makodingo. He's a political strategist. Also with me in studio this morning is Benji Ndolo, political analyst. I'm also joined by Kamotho Waiganjo. He's a lawyer and a political analyst as well. And Joy Mdivo. Good morning, lady and gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us on Citizen Extra. Let's go back to that rally in Bomet. A lot of political undertones there, and the question that instantly comes to mind is why campaign for the Deputy President at this point? Isn't it too early? Let me start with you, Makodingo.
Thank you, Lillian, for having me. Jubilee is clear. I think Jubilee is clear on the way forward until 2032. We know the President is beginning his term in a couple of months, the second term in a couple of months. And after that, Jubilee has been very clear that we are going to support the Deputy President for that seat. Bomet is an important place because there is a pretender to the throne in Bomet, Governor Isaac Ruto, who imagines that somehow he can take on the Deputy President and emerge a winner. It's good to be ambitious. I mean, he's attempting to get a second term. But Jubilee will prevail. Ultimately, I think Jubilee will prevail, both in the next general election and in our support for the Deputy President moving forward.
Benji.
Lillian, good morning. I think it is overly presumptuous to talk about the president beginning his new term. It's okay to be optimistic, but we must not be seen to be, disrespectful of, the Constitution and of democracy in general. There was envisioned a demarcation between the civil service, between cabinet and pure politics, and that is getting blurred by the day. It leaves a bad taste in the mouth in basically for those who necessarily don't politically support the regime, when you have a cabinet secretary whose work it is to electrify the country, going around making predictions about who will win elections, who will not, and he himself is not an elected official. So I think there are many issues here, and Jubilee advisor here should be advised that it's good to be optimistic but not overly presumptuous to kind of foretell the future. We don't even know if we'll be here tomorrow, Lillian.
And just touching on what Benji has just touched on there, Kamotho, the cabinet secretary there giving an assurance that Central Kenya would back Deputy President William Ruto's bid for 2022. Is he speaking for Central Kenya? Is he speaking for himself? Is he speaking for the president? Can a single person purport to speak for an entire region in terms of politics that are 5 years down the line?
Oh, Lillian, that is politics. I mean, people always purport to speak for other people because obviously you can't have the 10 odd million voters from Central Kenya speaking. But I think it's important to understand that Jubilee is running 2 elections at the same time, probably investing in one more than the other, depending on where it is. If you go to places where the presidency, there is no challenge to any of the candidates, whether you're talking about the president or the president, then you'll find that the concentration is on election 2017. But in places where the issue the pecking order, the political pecking order is not very clear, then the focus then becomes on 2022, particularly when the deputy president is concerned. So this is not surprising. And remember that there have been undertones, suggestions that the greater Mount Kenya region may not support the deputy president come 2022. That message must be reaffirmed by those appointed to be, in a sense, political leaders, either appointed or elected or otherwise perceived to be political. That must be emphasized every day. But I think the point that Benji raises is an issue that we need to discuss about the role of cabinet secretary in a political system like ours. Because we must come to terms with the fact that the president and the deputy president are themselves allowed by the constitution to be partisan politically. They are not supposed, in terms of their performance of their duties, to give preference to the areas. But they will play partisan politics because they are going to an election. The people they appoint and who come with them and who will live with them, I think it would be rational to expect that those people will not engage in some level of partisan politics. And I think the question is to ensure that even as they play partisan politics, in terms of the way they carry out their day-to-day duties as public servants, they are not seen then in delivery of services, in delivery of resources, to be partisan. But in terms of expressing support for, it would be irrational to expect them not to. And so I think that's something we need to come to terms with, and ensure that the people we totally disallow from engaging in partisan politics are career public servants. But for persons that are elected by a political head, I think you expect inevitably they are going to play some politics.
Joy, the cabinet secretary, they are not really outlining, what he's done in his specific docket, but, clearly endorsing the deputy president here and speaking on behalf of Central Kenya. Your thoughts on the same?
What my senior Kamodo has said has hit the nail on the head. These gentlemen have been selected and appointed into office by virtue of their political inclinations and cronyism. So these positions of cabinet secretaries have been given. Remember when we were starting, there was the debate whether Ms. Ngilu and Mr. Barala should be given appointed posts, seeing as their politicians. And the assurance was that they will no longer practice politics. But we have seen the evolution of the cabinet secretary from being non-partisan, technocrat, professional, to now being beholden to the people who have appointed them, such that when they need to, they put off the coat of the technocrat and put on the coat of the politician. It's a dangerous trend, because what you have at the end of the day, they are very aware that come the end of this particular administration, they are looking at possibly not being in a job if they're not running for office. So they have to look like they are supporting the people who have appointed them. And I find it a tragedy, because when we're changing the constitution to have cabinet secretaries who are technocrats, we're looking at people who will serve Kenya without any partisanship. But now what we have is somebody who, even rather than doing what they're actually appointed to do, are doing something totally different. We saw it with P.S. Moravuri when he was busy looking for people to register as voters rather than negotiate with doctors. So it's become a mishmash. We need to re-examine it. We need to call it out and criticize, because if we're going to have people working for all Kenyans, they have to be seriously not politically inclined, not in public anyway. They can have an opinion, but they cannot be the ones on the campaign trail beating the campaign drums. Away from cabinet secretaries, Martha Karua has been a sharp critic of the deputy president. She's now pledged to support him fully. Makodingo, did this come as a surprise to you?
Not really. Martha comes from the political bedrock, an area that can be considered the political bedrock of Jubilee. It will be foolhardy for her to go to an election in Kirinyaga supporting Raila Odinga like she's been doing for a while. I think, in my opinion, I think it came a little too late, and even her insistence on remaining on a party, NAK Kenya, is quite foolhardy, if you ask me, because Kirinyaga is one of those areas where Jubilee is fairly strong. It's not an area where we are going to have headaches in terms of our candidates, in terms of the people you're campaigning for. So yes, it makes sense that she should do so, though I think, knowing her, I mean, this is the lady who walked out on President Moi at a time when nobody would dare do something like that. and in broad daylight in front of live TV she walked out of out on Moi. Our differences with the deputy president are quite known. They have been quite publicized since 2007. So I think there is a sense in which you can see dishonesty, but then again politics is about interest. Our interests are served better by Jubilee, so our support for the deputy president is quite understandable in my opinion.
Gentlemen, I'd like to get your thoughts from the same Benji.
You know, I don't blame Martha. It is surprising, as Dr. says. It is against everything that she has stood for, everything that she has, you know, very vociferously and vocally, you know, fought against. But the problem is the electorate, Lillian. We've talked about this many times. The lack of proper, sustained, meaningful civic education. Our electorate are so fickle, are so gullible, and so in the noise, in the political noise, they are not able to sift through the issues and through the individuals. And so someone like Martha is forced to make this move. I'm sure it is pretty much a last resort for her. Same to Honorable Gitobwe Manyara in Meru. And they're just left, you know, you want to lead people, but then the same people are not able to think clearly through issues. So what do? I certainly don't advocate for that, but it really heralds the need to stand for very clear, ideological-driven political parties and agenda in this country so that we can then find leadership. Outside of that, it's really just a cynical game.
I'm also curious, Kamotho, on these persons and you know these politicians that are coming out to popularize Ruto's re-election, and whether this is likely to cost President Uhuru Kenyatta's re-election.
Well, I don't think so. I think you know, every vote counts, and Martha Karua has her own admirers, you know, across the country, and she doesn't injure the deputy president. I'm not sure that it helps her cause. Part of the reality being that, in fact, I think what it has done, it has injured her brand. Because there's also a brand that people admired, you know, and the fact that she appeared to be a principled person. She was not willing to concede on issues other than on principle. For her to now be seen as purely an opportunistic politician injures her brand. But it's a typical Kenyan thing. I mean, people like James Orengo learned the hard way. Professor Nyong'o learned the hard way. I think both Peter Kenneth and Martha Karua learned after trying the presidency and being trounced even by rejected ballots, spoiled ballots, and Abdul Badida. So I think they've come to terms with the political reality of this country. Unfortunately for Martha, I think I am not sure that the people of Kirinyaga are going to be as generous to her, particularly because even when she has shifted, she has not abandoned her party. So in a sense, she appears to be double-minded about her unequivocal support for the president. And in central Kenya, it is actually not so much about the support for the deputy president. The reality is the support for the president. If you appear to be equivocal there, it can be problematic. But for the deputy president, it's a plus. It's good for him. It defines him as a national politician. Some of the many positive things that Martha Karua espouses rub off on him. You know, those sorts of things that Martha used to say about him, you know, in a sense, they are undone by this new stature. But I am not sure that it helps brand Martha.
Joy, Kamotho says that this has injured Karua's brand and that she's being an opportunist.
Most definitely, because if you remember when President Obama was here, the opposition politicians that are sitting with him, and Ms. Karua was among them. Now, that was a time when people in her backyard looked at her with the eye of, oh, so you're not just out in the cold politically, you're actually actively working to undermine the presidency of Uhuru Kenyatta. And that is where the rain started beating her politically. Because up until that point, the people in her constituency were still very galvanized around her. But when she was seen to stand with Honorable Raila against President Kenyatta, sort of reporting him to Barack Obama, that's when the rain started beating her. And now when she came back to say, I want to run for governor, immediately Jubilee puts up several formidable opponents who actually look like they can bring her down. And she was asked, fold up your party, join Jubilee, and she adamantly refused. And that crystallized that position where she was not just trying to run for governor, she was actively against President Uhuru Kenyatta. So I agree with Makodingo. This is too little too late. It's not even trying to be opportunistic now. It's just trying to salvage something out of this situation. And I think she left it too late. I don't think the people of Kirinyaga are buying it. And she's gotten to a place where now she's being slowly but surely relegated into the backseat of politics, which in my opinion is a tragedy, because in Kenya, our politicians behave as if they are career politicians. They must be in politics, active for life. That if you take a backseat, if you re-strategize, somehow you are losing it. They need to get a life outside politics, because that gives them time to fight another day. We saw it in the days of the first President Kenyatta's term, where people would even be out of parliament for 1 session, 2 sessions, then come back, relaunch, and start your career again. But these days it's become do or die, and people are suffering delusions of grandeur, imagining that they can recapture their glory days. Ms. Karo would be best advised to just take a back seat, do a few lectures in some high-level universities around the world, build brand Martha again, give it some time, people forget, then relaunch another time. But if she goes for governor this time, she'll lose and lose badly, and this might just be it for her.
Before we continue with this conversation, let's cross over to Eldoret County and listen into news from there.
Thank you very much, Lillian. I'm getting you loud and clear from Eldoret town, Uasin County, home turf of Deputy President. And here politics is getting more hard for political aspirants. And I'm just specifically in Keses constituency, where this constituency has witnessed a very big number of political aspirants. Just imagine 11 of them. And I'm just talking to one of them just to tell us maybe the challenges he's going through, because there are allegations that this particular aspirant is not going to make it to the ballot box because he didn't maybe get his citizenship on time. And that's why, according to the election laws, is that someone from outside Kenya needs to be maybe having 10 years plus so that he can qualify to be to vie for any political seat. With me is Keses political member of parliament aspirant Dr. Swarap Mishra, whom we want just to talk to put light on this, to tell us, is he really qualifying for this seat or not? Okay, Dr. Hari, when did you become a Kenyan citizen?
I became a Kenyan citizen October 2000. In the year 2000, October. Yeah.
Maybe, and where are these allegations coming from that you are not, you acquired your citizenship in 2013?
You know what happened? I used to use my passport as my identity card. But now, 2013, I made my identity card, ID, Kenya ID. So when I used my voter registration, I used my Kenyan ID, where it is written 2013. So unfortunately, our opponents, some of them become excited, and they said that 2013 I acquired the citizenship. But the truth of the matter is that we acquired in 2000 October.
Have you been cleared by Jubilee Party?
Oh yes, Jubilee Party. I thank God and thank our party high command and Jubilee Party and our leadership that we are cleared, because there is no manenos. Yes.
We are seeing you being treated as an outsider from you are not a Kenyan, or you are not a person from this land. What are some of the challenges you are going through in your campaign?
Well, first of all, I thank God and people who have already accepted that I am a Kenyan. And the thing is that some of my opponents, our opponents, they are getting lot of they're bringing a lot of challenges and issues which is not true and pure lies to us, so that we can withdraw our candidature. But the first one was the destroying our billboards, and which they wanted, they thought that we would be scared, and which never happened. Number one. Number two, then they distributed leaflets against the line of racism
and tribalism, and because our constituency cases is the constituency which is also cosmopolitan in rural area. So, however, it never worked, the leaflets. Then they attacked some of our teammates, Team Mishra, those young boys and girls who were going back to their home. They were attacked, and then to scare us, then they started also all the stuff of these things. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lillian. We are still following up on this story just to unfold what is going to happen after this. Back to you, studio, Lillian.
Thanks for that, Wanyama. That is Wanyama from Eldoret County. And we are back in studio now with political analysts Kamotho Waiganjo, Joy Mdivo, Benji Ndolo, and Washington Makodingo. We've been talking Uhuru Kenyatta's succession debate, which was reignited yesterday at a rally in Bomet. And we played excerpts from that rally. There were several endorsements and several politicians and indeed cabinet secretaries present who came out to say that they would be supporting his bid. Makodingo, you know, the relationship, the message that this sends, the fact that the deputy president is out there in what looks like campaigns for his 2022 bid, as opposed to focusing on Uhuru Kenyatta's re-election, the message this sends as regards their relationship.
I don't think it's true that the deputy president is campaigning for his 2022 bid. Jubilee sold a dream in 2013, and when they were selling the dream, it was known, it was clear, it is still clear to everyone that the president will do his 2 terms and the deputy president will do his 2 terms, and there was an agreement on this. Campaigning for a 2022 is in effect saying that we know the work that we've done is sufficient to get us re-elected in 2017. We are doing extremely well and a lot of hard work to ensure that the president is re-elected, and he is doing. I think the deputy president is indefatigable. He's all over the country. He could be in 4 different counties in one day, and the message is consistent that we want a 2nd term, we want to complete the things we started in 2013, and we still will need more time come 2022 to actually continue doing this work. And I haven't had, in fact, I don't think I've had the deputy president himself actually campaigning for 2022. It is always the people around, a lot of these former, so to speak, former TNA members and former TNA supporters who are continuously giving the assurance that we made a promise in 2013 to the deputy president to support him when the president takes over, and we intend to keep that promise. And I think it is important to continue giving that assurance, because then the opposition, as they would rightfully, is going around a lot of these DPs' strongholds and telling them this is not going to be honored, you have been duped, we've seen this before. The assurance that these cabinet secretaries are giving and these politicians from Central are giving is that we made this promise, we made it publicly, we intend to keep it, and we will be here with you, we'll walk the journey with you. And I think that is important moving forward.
Benji, Makodingo, they're saying that the agreement was that Uhuru Kenyatta would serve for 2 terms, and then, thereafter, William Ruto would take over. But this then, the assumption here would be that it's an almost obvious win for President Uhuru Kenyatta come August.
Yeah, I mean, then why campaign, why go to elections? I think there's many unknowns, as I alluded to earlier. And I think also, Lillian, the fact that, the fact that there have to be all these reaffirmations and reassurances itself tells you that there are other dynamics that are, probably indicative of some tension, some issues. I obviously would not want to wish them ill, but I am sure, Lillian, you don't go around telling everyone I'm Lillian Muli from Citizen, because it's obvious. Why the need to continually stress about 2022, why continually reassure him? And it is not a coincidence also, Lillian, that many times these so-called TNA MPs that Makodingo is talking about always make these statements in the presence of the deputy president. So I'm sure they enjoy his support, even facilitation. And, I think it's premature. I think it's especially premature given the fact that we have a lot of issues in this country on the security front, on the services front, water, unemployment for the youth, etc. And so what we have now, Lillian, is a leadership that cannot really concentrate on delivery and execution of services that move this country to the next level. We've got now cabinet secretaries who are envisioned under Article 153(4), supposed to be very professional, very technocratic, as Joyce said, reporting to Parliament, and now playing very, very, very tough and hard knuckle politics that sometimes require that you descend into the sewer. You know, for example, someone like Kinjuri, who is himself a former politician, he'll have to sometimes really fight hard against someone like the Honorable Raila Odinga. And so this cannot augur well for the civil service. And these are all the many issues that Jubilee are not taking into consideration in their pursuit to retain power, in their pursuit to continue to, you know, keep the promise of 2022, and like Magodingo said, 2032, which is 20-something years away.
Can I respond before you move to someone else?
Go ahead.
The assumption Benji and a lot of other people are making is that when the cabinet secretary is out there on a political rally, that when the president and the deputy are campaigning, that government stops to work. And this is not true. Government offices have officers working day in and day out. There are security operations going on in this country every single day. I mean, there is KDF in Baringo trying to sort out the security situation. Government does not cease to function because people are on the campaign trail. In fact, an argument can be reasonably made that those cabinet secretaries out there are creating awareness on the work government has been doing, the work government is doing, and the work government is going to continue to do. And there is no law. Really, strictly speaking, the law actually does allow for this. I mean, the Leadership and Integrity Act that essentially implements Article Chapter 10 on leadership and integrity gives a very clear exclusion of cabinet secretaries from the requirement that they should not engage in partisan politics. Yeah, it's clear. It says cabinet secretaries and county executive committee members are excluded from the exclusion that you should not be engaged in politics. And Kamodo said it earlier. The person that I would be worried if they were involved in partisan politics will be a police officer, will be a soldier, will be an assistant chief, someone who, irrespective of what government is in power, they'll still serve the state. Those I will be worried for. But someone whose responsibility, first, he works for the president, at the pleasure of the president. He takes office, and for 5 years, you have a contract for 5 years, a contract that is dependent on the president. I expect that you'll go out there and defend the work you've been doing for those years. I expect that you'll go out there and ask the people of Kenya to give you more time so that as your ministry, you can continue doing the good work that you're doing. It's not like Jubilee's the cabinet secretary is implementing Cod's manifesto. This is Jubilee's manifesto they're doing. They don't walk around consulting Raila on what it is that he wants to be done.
Right. Kamoto, let's enjoy. I'd like to get your thoughts on the same.
Yeah, I think we can overhammer this point, but let's live in the real world and look at other presidential systems. You know, when Hillary Clinton was seeking the presidency, the cabinet secretaries appointed under a Democratic administration were pushing Obama's policies and explaining why it was important to continue those policies. And so it is impossible to not have a level of partisanship. I think what would worry me is if we were sitting here saying that Jubilee has therefore been investing national resources exclusively in Jubilee zones. That would be a worry. But in terms of expressing partisan views, that is going to happen. Now, the other thing I'd be worried about is that career civil servants are now involved in partisan politics, people who outlive governments, which means if we have a new government coming, we may have to undo our public service because we have people who are partisan. But in terms of the cabinet secretaries, I think it's an issue we should put aside. Let us ask them to also ensure that in playing their politics, it doesn't prejudice the work that they are doing for the nation. But I think it's not, I don't think that it's a crisis. And like Dr. rightly says, that discussion actually arose in Parliament during the enactment of the Leadership and Integrity Law. And let's remember, the question of non-partisan cabinet secretary is not in the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't stop them from being partisan. The Leadership and Integrity Act allows cabinet secretaries and CECs, the ones in the counties, to be partisan because it excludes them to express partisan views because they are appointed through a partisan process.
But that's subsidiary legislation.
Yeah, and I'm saying the Constitution doesn't provide, so there's nothing unconstitutional. So I'm just saying there is nothing unconstitutional. What we should be worried about is whether that political neutrality is about service delivery. We want to see service delivery that does not reflect, because national resources are national resources, they're not Jubilee resources. But in terms of expressing support for the government's programs, I think it would be unfortunate if a cabinet minister appointed by this government cannot go and say this government has done roads. and so government has delivered on its promises. I think it would be naive to expect that not to happen. But coming back, Lillian, to the question of 2022, I think that any government that is seeking to win an election, or any party, must always give the impression that it is going to win. There's nobody who goes into an election and say, but if we lose, we'll come back again in 2030 something.
True. You
always operate on the basis that you're winning, because that's also important for your base. They also need to know that you are unbeatable. The only danger that is there is that, again, if you are too confident, that can subdue your base, because then they think this thing is in the bag. And I think that's where Jubilee needs to be careful, that sometimes in selling the 2022 agenda so strong, without saying even 2017 is a contest, is that people may sleep on that day and say, in any case, we've already got this election, our focus is actually 2022, that's when we'll have opposition. There is opposition in 2017, and it is strong opposition. And so it's important that, again, you don't become overconfident and think that you have nailed it. It's not nailed until August 13th, August 12th.
What Joy, as we're closing?
I look at when you have a cabinet secretary who's very partisan, sometimes you find that the electorate do not appreciate the work the government has done, simply because of who has done it. Case in mind is what happened in Kibera, when the then CS, Ms. Waiguru, had initiated some projects, and when there was a big fallout, they went and demolished what she had done because they did not appreciate the work. So sometimes being partisan can be a poison chalice. But as Kamodo said, that horse has been flogged enough. But talking about 2022, I think the conversation was started. If you look at the last 1 month, 2 months or so, Governor Joho has been in the news a lot. And when you're looking at this posturing, you can understand it's not just for his re-election, because that is almost in the bag. You're looking at 2022 politics. Today they're in Bomas, and the two governors clearly who have direct nomination, so to speak, because they're unopposed, is Governor Joho and Governor Kidero. Those are the two who are running the most powerful cities, as it were, in Kenya right now. Come 2022, then they'll be ineligible to run for governor again. So if you have been governor, where are you going next? So already you can see posturing from the opposition looking at 2022, because we can look at the dynamics of the day. With NASA and what is going on right now, them being formidable as an opposition, that is true. Them triumphing over Jubilee, that is doubtful in my book. But if they're looking at 2022, then they need to start putting forward who they think can be a formidable team to meet Jubilee in 2022, because 2017 might be a little too late for them. And when you see that posturing happening, then I think it is important for Jubilee to find the answer. And that is why I think the conversation about deputy president is coming in play. Not because they are underestimating the election for 2017. No, it's because they're looking at what team is coming up in 2022. And if you're a politician, like Kinjuri said, safari ya kesho unaanza kupanga leo. So they're looking at this with a future's eye, because you cannot be guaranteed of tomorrow, but you better be planning or be ready for it. So I think this conversation about the deputy president is actually not just generic in Jubilee. It is in response to what is being organized within the opposition, and they think they need to consolidate their base. Look at CCM has been reaping the whirlwind with Jubilee fallout, the same as Governor Munya has been reaping in Meru. So there's need to counter those little pockets that are breaking down the base that has formed the stronghold of Jubilee. And so there is the need to now put forward, we have longevity, we have tomorrow, we have deputy president, right, so that your people stay with you and they keep engaged in your politics. Very briefly, a one-liner, starting with you, Benji, on the IEBC, NASA calling for parallel tallying of results. In other jurisdictions, we do know that this has happened. The media across the world, run separate tallying centers every time there's an election. What would be the downside of doing this?
The only downside, Lillian, is the fact that we're an extremely polarized and still immature democracy. But certainly you're right. The first informant, the way that we knew that Barack Obama had won the election in 2008 was through CNN, Wolf Blitzer to be exact. And so it's not necessarily a bad idea, especially where doubt prevails on monkey business between the polling station and transmission. It's actually in the law. The Miscellaneous Amendment Statute of 2012, after the Kriegler Commission, determines that you must you know, transmit results from the station electronically. By the way, this didn't happen in 2013, leading to all sorts of credibility issues and allegations of rigging, etc. The problem now becomes when there's so much, you know, doubt and anger as well, which in many ways, by the way, is why Raila Odinga is demonized, because he has this image of a really angry and now intolerant person who has been robbed so many times, and he's not going to take it anymore. You heard Babu Awino there the other day that we're just going to go and swear him and march him, etc. That's where it becomes problematic, Lillian. But certainly as a country, we have a long way to go to, you know, understand democracy, establish institutions that are independent, because all these beautiful things are now in the text of the Constitution, but we're not at the point of maturity yet. And that's how come someone like Kamotho, that is an expert, is now actually at the forefront of, you know, bringing all these other arguments about how a CS really should be out there, you know, doing all these partisan politics and, you know, making some people happy, but also annoying many, many others who you're supposed to be serving non-partisanly. And of course the other issue is that the president himself had promised that he and his deputy would be the only cabinet secretaries. What happened to that promise? Thanks.
Kamotho, let's go back to the IEBC issue and NASA calling for parallel tallying of results.
Well, one, there's nothing wrong with power. In fact, I would hope that Jubilee also has its own PVT. It's only, I mean, in most, you know, progressive elections, you know, people who have a stake in the elections have a parallel voter tally. And in fact, it even happens now manually. Most of these parties have agents everywhere who transmit their results to their headquarters all the time. I saw it in 2002, 2007, it's there. I think the problem here, and you need to read the Kriegler report, and to see the role that the media played in the crisis of 2007, is the fact that we also have an overly politicized medium of informing the nation as to where we are at. And the problem with that is that that is not always managed very well. And so while we need to allow for a parallel tally so that any legitimate serious actor in the electoral process has their own evidence of what the election is saying, we need to be careful about how we manage results. Because unlike places as in Zambia like 3 weeks ago, where results come out, elections happen, and a week later people are still discussing whether they should be released, and people have gone back to work. In this country, the nation stops. The temperatures are so high that, you know, the wrong management of information can light up the entire country. So in a sense, while it's a progressive thing, as it's important, I would hope Jubilee would do it and any other serious player. I think let's be very careful about how that information is managed so that it doesn't lead to the sort of crisis we had in 2007. As we develop into a more credible, more sincere, more mature. I'm trying to avoid the word mature, but if we become a little more honest as a people, particularly those of us who transmit information, and I'm talking about the media here, as we become more and more honest and less partisan, then it may be that way of the future. But for now, it needs to be managed very carefully. But by law, by practice, nothing wrong with it.
I thank you very much for your time, Kamotho Waiganjo, Joy Mdivo, Benji Ndolo, and Washington Makodingo, all political analysts. We are back with the trends with Joy Chelagat. Stay tuned.